I'm Anil Kumar, and now let's further look into periodic functions. We'll talk about cycle and period in this particular video. So we have our two waves. One is kind of a sawtooth wave, the other one is a sinusoidal function. Remember, a periodic function could have any shape, and what is very important here is a periodic function has a graph that repeats at regular intervals. So that is important. So we are looking for a graph that repeats at regular interval. So that is kind of critical for periodic function. Shape is not important. So it could be any shape. It could be sinusoidal. It may not be sinusoidal. Okay. So that is the first point. Now when we say graph that repeats, then we are actually talking about two things, right? So graph that repeats is called a cycle. So cycle is the portion that repeats. That repeats at a regular interval. Now when we say regular interval, that is what we call as a period, right? So this horizontal or independent variable, so the period basically is the independent variable change, independent variable increment. I can use increment or change. So period is the regular variable increment, right, that repeats the pattern, right? So that is how these things are related, right? So important thing here is, let us look into our graphs. So the period will be, let us consider from here to this place. So this horizontal distance is the period. So this is what we are calling as time period, T, right? So in this particular graph, it is of 2 units. And when we say the cycle that repeats, then what we are really saying is that the y values, right? So dependent variables. So this is the y value that repeats, right? So that is our basic understanding of a periodic function. So it has two parts, which is cycle and period, right? So in this particular graph, you could say that, let us start the cycle from here. So it goes from a minimum value, kind of like this, comes back to the minimum value, and exactly same pattern is repeated again, right? So this is one cycle. So whatever I highlighted here will be termed as a cycle, right? So this is the cycle. And the duration between these, the increment after which the cycle repeats, is called the time period. I should not use time period, but well, in general we use it, but that is the period. Let me write period. So it could be in any units, right? It could be distances also at times. It could be any unit. Most of the time, when we take examples, we take time as our horizontal axis. So most of the time it is time, but it could be any, right? So that is how it is. Now let us define few more terms here which are kind of important to understand. So one is that we are always looking for a maximum and minimum value for such repeating patterns, and these are kind of important. So normally we have peaks, so we call those maximum values as peaks. Let me use another ink and write those things. So peak is the maximum value achieved, right? And trough is the minimum value. So you could write minimum also, but sometimes we use the word trough, right? So trough is the minimum point on the graph, right? So these are two particular values which we are always looking for. Whenever we have sinusoidal functions, so these are very well defined functions. So here we could say a few things for guaranteed, right? But we cannot say for other functions. So we have some more characteristics here, which we'll consider in the next video. And those will be on finding the time duration, how to find time duration or the cycle time. You could also call this as a cycle time. Time for one full cycle, right? Cycle time, right? So how to find time duration in relation with peaks and troughs, right? So that is how we are going to explore this. So you'll find that if I check time duration between two peaks, I get one cycle. Do you see that? Or even between two troughs, I get one cycle. So that is how it could be, figured out. Now, another characteristics for sinusoidal functions could be amplitude. So amplitude, and we'll also talk about axis in the next video. Axis is the center line, right? So it is kind of a axis through which it goes through, and amplitude is how far the wave goes away from the axis. So we'll look into these in the next video. But I hope from here you understand that whenever we talk about cycle, it is the variation in y values, and when we talk about the period, it is the variation in the horizontal values, right? The independent variable variations relate to period, and dependent variable is what relates to the pattern of a cycle, right? So I hope this point is clear. Let's move forward and get into some more kind of equations for our functions when they are sinusoidal. Thank you and all the best.